I was halfway through a quarterly revenue report when I learned my mother had finally found a way to embarrass me inside a hotel I owned. That sounds dramatic. It was not. It was Tuesday. My office sat on the top floor of a glass building in downtown Chicago. All clean lines, quiet carpet, and furniture that looked expensive because it was not flashy. I do not trust flashy. Flashy is what people buy when they need strangers to think their money is real. My desk had one laptop, one legal pad, and a cup of coffee I had forgotten about until it turned cold enough to file a complaint. The report in front of me was from the Monarch Hotel, a historic luxury property 3 blocks from the river. Marble lobby, brass elevators, old money smell baked into the walls. The kind of place where guests lowered their voices without knowing why. I had bought it 6 months earlier through an LLC, because I liked my business quiet and my family uninformed. Public records would show the company name. A good attorney could follow the chain. My parents could not follow a restaurant bill if the tip was already calculated. The Monarch had been underpriced, poorly managed, and sitting on land worth more than the previous owners understood. I understood it very well. That was sort of my annoying little gift. Give me a distressed property, a bad management structure, and a few neglected revenue streams, and I could usually find the money everyone else had missed. My family called that being difficult. Camilla called it playing businesswoman. My father, Donovan Hayes, once told me I had a strange little obsession with buildings nobody wanted. This was right after I sold my first renovated roadside motel for enough profit to pay off my graduate loans and buy my first apartment. He said it while sitting in a leased German sedan he could barely afford. People are funny when they are wrong with confidence. I was reviewing banquet revenue when my assistant called through. Julian Pierce is here from the Monarch. Send him in. Julian was the Monarch's general manager, and one of the few people who knew I owned the hotel. He was in his late 40s. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the kind of calm that comes from spending years handling rich people who think a cold soup is a civil rights violation. He entered with a leather folder tucked under one arm. Do you have a minute? Ms. Hayes? For you. Julian. Maybe 2. He smiled. But not all the way. That told me this was not about occupancy rates. He placed the folder on my desk and opened it with careful hands. We have an engagement event scheduled for Saturday evening. High-profile guest list. Vance family involved. That got my attention. Preston Vance? Yes. He is engaged to Camilla Hayes. I leaned back in my chair. There it was. My sister's engagement party. At my hotel. Of course. Camilla had always been good at choosing beautiful rooms she could not pay for. She was 28. Professionally charming. Socially polished. And allergic to accountability. My parents called her our bright star. I called her what she was, a luxury expense with hair extensions, not out loud. Usually, interesting, I said. Julian slid a printed event manifest toward me. It came through the private events office. Bride's family requested several special accommodations. They always do. This one includes instructions regarding you. I looked up. Julian did not blink. That was another thing I liked about him. He never rushed bad news. He let it arrive properly dressed. I pulled the document closer. At first, it looked like any event brief. Cocktail reception in the East Gallery. Dinner in the Grand Ballroom. Floral installation by a preferred vendor. Security coordination. Champagne service. Live strings. Seating chart. Guest tiers. Then I saw my name. Gemma Hayes. Not under family table. Not under immediate relatives. Not even under general guests. My name sat under a separate category labeled Limited Access. Beside it was a gray badge assignment. Zone C. I read the line below it twice. Mostly because it was so rude it deserved a second viewing. Guest is not to enter primary dining floor except at family discretion. The next note was better. By better, I mean worse. Arrival instructions. Service and catering loading entrance only. Please avoid main lobby exposure to prevent discomfort for VIP guests. I stared at the page. There are moments in life when you feel insulted. And then there are moments when the insult comes formatted in a professional event template with bullet points and spacing. Julian cleared his throat. There is one more note. He turned the page. Under meal service. beside my name. Someone had typed, "No meal required. Water only." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was efficient. My mother had managed to reduce me to a hydration concern. "Who submitted this?" I asked. Julian pointed to the authorization line. "Helena Hayes." My mother. Of course she had typed it. Helena liked cruelty best when it had margins. I remembered being 16 and overhearing her tell a neighbor that Camilla had inherited the family grace, while I had a more practical personality. Practical meant I did chores. Practical meant I did not need attention. Practical meant I could be ignored until someone needed a ride, a check, or a scapegoat. By the time I was 25, I had stopped expecting fairness. That was the year I bought my first motel. It was a faded 2-story property near a highway in Indiana, with bad carpet and worse plumbing. My father called it a midlife crisis for someone who hadn't reached midlife. My mother said she hoped I had not used real money. Camilla laughed for 3 straight minutes. That little motel became the first profitable asset in my portfolio. My parents never mentioned that part. Families love editing. Julian stood quietly while I finished reading. He had highlighted another section. Guest conduct expectation. Gemma Hayes should not approach Preston Vance's parents unless invited. Bride's family prefers no discussion of employment, finances, or personal history. That one was almost tender. They did not just want me hidden. They wanted me silent. "Do you want me to cancel the event?" Julian asked. I looked at him. His voice stayed professional, but there was steel under it. Julian protected the monarch like it was a living thing. He also did not appreciate guests humiliating the owner inside her own property. Good managers notice disrespect. Great managers document it. "No," I said. He waited. I closed the folder and tapped one finger on the cover. "Do they know I own the hotel?" "No. The contract is under your family's event account. The ownership chain has not been discussed." "Good." His eyebrows moved slightly. For Julian, that was basically a gasp. "Miss Hayes. If they arrive under this assumption, the staff may be placed in an uncomfortable position. The staff will follow the manifest." His jaw tightened. "Including the service entrance instruction?" "Including that. And the Zone C badge? Especially that." He studied me for a second. "Some people mistake calm for forgiveness. Julian was too smart for that. He knew calm could also mean a decision had already been made. Signed, filed, and placed in the right drawer. "May I ask why?" he said. I stood and walked to the window. From my office, I could see the city moving below in clean little patterns. Cars stopping, people crossing, buildings holding their ground while everyone else hurried around them. Real estate teaches you patience. Bad tenants eventually reveal themselves. Bad management eventually leaves a paper trail. Bad families do both. My mother believes she is managing my embarrassment. I said. My father believes silence means weakness. Camilla believes status is the same thing as value. Julian said nothing. I turned back to him. "I want them comfortable." "Comfortable?" "Yes. Comfortable people talk too much." That earned the smallest smile from him. I returned to my desk and opened the folder again. "Make sure the staff treats the Vance family beautifully. No mistakes. No attitude. No whispering. No one tips them off." "Understood. And my badge? I can have it prepared. Gray lanyard. Zone C. Exactly as requested." His face gave nothing away, but I could tell he hated it. "Mrs. Dishon. Hayes. With respect. You do not need to walk through a loading dock to prove a point." "No," I said. "I need them to believe I will." That was the difference. I had spent years being treated like the family draft copy. Useful, but not presentable. The one they called when something broke. Then cropped out of the photo once it was fixed. I used to think if I became successful enough, calm enough, generous enough, they would finally see me clearly. That was a sweet little fantasy, also known as a waste of time. People who benefit from underestimating you are rarely eager to update their records. Julian gathered the papers. "I will instruct the events team to follow the manifest exactly." "Thank you." He paused at the door. "If anyone asks about ownership, you know nothing beyond normal operations. And if they insult you?" I picked up my cold coffee and took a sip. It was terrible, but I respected its commitment. Then we let them finish their sentences. Julian nodded once. After he left, I sat alone with the quiet. I did not cry. I did not call my mother. I did not text Camilla a screenshot and ask what on earth was wrong with her. Because that question had been answered many years earlier and did not need an encore. Instead, I opened my calendar and accepted the engagement invitation. Then I forwarded the manifest to my personal email, printed one copy, and slid it into the inner pocket of my black portfolio. My mother had given me a service entrance. My sister had given me Zone C. My father would probably give me that tired look he used when pretending disappointment was wisdom. Fine. On Saturday evening, I would arrive exactly as instructed, and by the time my car turned down the narrow alley behind the Monarch, the trap would already be waiting with the loading dock door open. The loading dock door was not dramatic. That bothered me a little, for the amount of family humiliation scheduled behind it. I expected at least a rusty chain, a flickering bulb, maybe a raccoon with judgmental eyes. Instead, it was just a clean steel service entrance with a keypad, a security camera, and a delivery schedule taped neatly beside it. The Monarch did not do ugly, even in the alley. My driver slowed beside the curb, right past the polished front entrance, where valets in navy coats were opening car doors for people who had never carried their own luggage in their lives. Through the front windows, I could see warm light spilling across the marble lobby. The chandeliers were on. The flowers were fresh. The brass doors looked like they had been polished by someone with a personal grudge against fingerprints. That was my property. $40 million of history. Our stone. Contracts. Staff. Risk. Debt management. And monthly payroll. And I was walking in through the same door used for seafood deliveries. Life has a sense of humor. Mine apparently preferred sarcasm. I stepped out of the car in a black dress that would have made my mother suspicious if she knew enough about clothing to recognize restraint as money. No sequins. No loud logo. Just clean tailoring. Old couture. And shoes comfortable enough for standing while relatives embarrassed themselves. That is one thing experience teaches you. Never wear painful shoes to a family event. You may need to leave quickly, or stand still for a long time while people lie. The night air carried the smell of rain, exhaust, and whatever the kitchen had started for the reception. Butter, garlic, warm bread. Expensive problems usually smell nice at first. I thanked my driver and walked toward the loading entrance. A young security guard opened the door before I reached the keypad. His name was Marcus. I knew because I made a point of learning staff names, especially the people who worked the hours nobody posted on social media. "Good evening, Miss Hayes," he said, then caught himself and lowered his voice. "Sorry. Good evening." "Evening." "Marcus." His eyes flicked toward my dress, then toward the event clipboard in his hand. He looked deeply uncomfortable. "Ma'am, they have you listed as Zone C," I said, his mouth pressed into a line. "Yes, ma'am." "Then let's make my mother proud." He did not laugh. Smart man. But his shoulders relaxed enough to let me pass. Inside, the service corridor was bright, busy, and blessedly honest. No fake laughter. No champagne voice. Just staff moving with purpose. Cooks calling times. Servers checking trays. A florist carrying extra stems in a bucket. Someone pushing a rack of linen napkins that probably cost more than my first sofa. As I walked through, the staff noticed me in pieces. First the hostess from private dining. Then 2 banquet captains. Then the sous chef near the prep table. Respect moved down the hall faster than a rumor at a country club. People stepped aside. Not dramatically. Not like I was royalty. More like I was the person who signed the checks and did not make their jobs worse for sport. That kind of respect matters to me. It is quieter than applause and worth a lot more. Julian appeared near the staff office, dressed in a perfect dark suit. Earpiece in place. Tablet under one arm. He looked from my face to the service corridor behind me. "You came through the loading dock," he said. "As ordered. I was hoping you might reconsider." I didn't. Then I remembered I enjoy clean data. He gave me a tired look. "Family events are not data. Everything is data. Julian, some of it just wears perfume." That got a real smile out of him. Small but there, He handed me the gray lanyard. The badge was plastic, clipped to a dull gray strap. On the front, in plain black letters, it read, Zone C Guest. Under that, limited access. My full name sat beneath it like a clerical error. Gemma Hayes. No title. No table. No meal. I held it for a moment. There was a time, years ago, when something like that would have made my stomach twist. I would have wondered what I had done wrong. I would have replayed every conversation with my mother, looking for the place where I had failed some invisible test. That was before I learned the test was rigged. My parents did not punish me because I failed. They punished me because I stopped auditioning. I slipped the lanyard over my head. Julian looked like he wanted to personally sue somebody. It suits me, said. I said. It absolutely does not. Good. That means the costume is working. He glanced toward the ballroom entrance. The Vance family arrived 10 minutes ago. Helena has been very visible. Of course she has. My mother treats wealthy people like houseplants. She keeps hovering, hoping they'll bloom approval. Camilla is in the bridal suite with photographers. She has always enjoyed documentation of herself. Donovan is at the bar. That tracks. Julian shifted the tablet in his hand. I need to remind you that the staff knows who you are. They can know quietly. They are angry quietly. That is the most useful kind. He nodded. But I could tell he still hated the situation. I appreciated that. I also needed him to let it unfold. Years earlier, when I bought that first motel near the highway, my father had come to look at it once. He stood in the parking lot, staring at the faded sign and the cracked asphalt like I had purchased a contagious disease. This is what you spent your savings on? He asked. Yes. Camilla is building connections. Real connections. You're buying broken toilets. I remembered that clearly because, as luck would have it, those broken toilets helped build the down payment for my second property. People underestimate plumbing. Rich or poor, everyone needs it to work. My parents drained their retirement accounts in installments for Camilla, acting workshops, image consultants, a public relations certificate from a private program with glossy brochures and suspicious job placement numbers, designer clothes for networking, a luxury apartment because, according to my mother, appearance matters in her field. When I asked for a short-term loan to cover closing costs on my second property, my father told me, responsible adults did not chase fantasies. 6 months later, Camilla needed money for a brand strategy retreat in Sedona. Apparently, that was not a fantasy. That was growth. I learned a lot from that. Mostly, I learned banks were more reliable than parents. Julian walked me toward the staff door that opened near the ballroom's side corridor. Before he touched the handle, he turned to me. You still have time to enter through the lobby. No, I said. I want the whole experience. Most owners prefer not to be humiliated inside their own assets. Most owners lack imagination. He exhaled through his nose. Very well. He opened the door. Sound rolled out first. String music. Polite laughter. Glasses touching. The soft, expensive buzz of people pretending not to calculate one another's net worth. I stepped into the side corridor and paused just beyond the open kitchen doors. From there, I could see the grand ballroom through a gap in the service partition. The room looked beautiful. I will give the Monarch team credit. They had turned Camilla's engagement party into the kind of event that made people feel richer simply by standing there. Tall white flowers, gold-rimmed chargers, crystal glassware, candlelight bouncing off the old mirrors, waiters moving like clockwork. My sister had chosen well, or, more accurately, she had chosen my hotel well. Helena stood near the center of it all in a pale champagne dress, one hand resting lightly on Mrs. Vance's arm as if they had been old friends since the Mayflower. My mother had a talent for touching people she wanted to impress. A hand on the arm, a little lean forward, a soft laugh designed to suggest intimacy without evidence. Mrs. Vance stood perfectly still. That was the first sign she was not easily impressed. She wore navy, pearls, and the expression of a woman who had seen social climbing performed better by professionals. Preston stood nearby with Camilla, smiling in that polished way men smile when they believe life has arranged itself for their benefit. He was handsome, I suppose. Tall, expensive haircut, white teeth, good posture. He looked like he had never had to assemble furniture or compare grocery prices. Fine. Not a crime. Just an ecosystem. Then I heard my mother's voice. Oh. The monarch has been very generous to us, Helena said. Loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Of course. When you know the right people. Certain doors open. I leaned one shoulder against the corridor wall. This was going to be good. Mrs. Vance gave a thin smile. How fortunate. Yes. Helena continued. Glowing now. They arranged a very special VIP discount for Camilla's celebration. We have always moved in the right circles. But I do believe this hotel understands the kind of family it is hosting tonight. I looked down at my gray badge. Limited access. Water only. The discount she was bragging about had not come from her connections. It had come from a policy I created quietly after buying the Monarch. Immediate family of employees and ownership could receive preferred event pricing at management discretion. Julian had applied it automatically because Camilla was my sister and because, despite all evidence, some part of me had still believed in not being petty before dessert. My mother was standing under chandeliers I owned, bragging to Vance about charity she did not know I had given her. That is the problem with fake status. It often rests on real money from someone you mistreated. Helena laughed again. Airy and pleased with herself, Donovan handled most of the arrangements. Naturally. We wanted Camilla's engagement to reflect our standards. I almost admired the nerve. Donovan had not handled the arrangements. Donovan had approved whatever looked impressive and ignored the payment schedule until accounting sent the second reminder. My father had spent his life mistaking signatures for leadership. Camilla lifted her glass and leaned into Preston as a photographer circled them. My sister looked radiant. I will admit that. She always knew how to photograph well. Some people develop character. Camilla developed angles. From the side corridor, one of the banquet servers approached me with a tray of champagne, then stopped when he saw my badge. His eyes flicked up in apology. Water? He asked quietly. Perfect, I said. He handed me a glass of sparkling water like it was evidence in a trial. I took it and watched my mother continue performing. The funny thing was, I did not feel small. Standing there in the shadow of the kitchen doors, with a gray lanyard against my black dress, I felt unusually clear. My family had spent years telling a story where I was the awkward extra, the practical daughter, the one who did not fit in pretty rooms. But the room was mine. The staff knew it. The contracts knew it. The bank knew it. The county registry knew it. The only people who did not know were the ones who had been loudest about my place in it. That seemed fair. A few minutes later, Julian's voice came through a staff radio near the service station, calm and clipped, calling for final dinner timing. Inside the ballroom, Helena raised her glass toward Mrs. Go. Vance and smiled like a woman who believed the night belonged to her. I lifted my water from the edge of the service corridor, to the right circles, I said under my breath. Then I stepped through the kitchen doors and let my gray lanyard enter the gold room. The gold room noticed me slowly, not all at once. Rich rooms rarely do anything all at once. They notice in layers. First came the servers, who already knew better than to stare. Then a few guests near the bar, glancing at the gray lanyard around my neck and trying to decide whether I was important, misplaced, or about to refill something. Then one of Camilla's friends from her public relations circle looked me up and down with the fast little scan women use when they are deciding whether another woman counts. I gave her the answer by not caring. The grand ballroom was full of polished people pretending the evening was effortless. Men in dark suits, women in silk, jewelry with enough insurance coverage to make a normal person sit down. A string quartet played near the windows, soft enough to be tasteful, loud enough to remind everyone that live music had been paid for. I stood near the edge of the room with my sparkling water and my Zone C badge resting against my dress. Limited access. It was almost impressive how much judgment fit on one piece of plastic. Camilla saw me before my parents did. Of course she did. My sister had always had a gift for spotting anything that might affect her appearance. A loose curl, a camera angle, a sister she had ordered through the staff entrance. She came toward me in a custom ivory gown that was not technically a wedding dress, but had clearly taken the scenic route around that rule. The neckline was elegant. The fabric was expensive. The smile was not. "Gemma," she said. drawing my name out like she was greeting a stain. Camilla. Her eyes dropped immediately to the lanyard. Oh, good, she said. They gave you the right badge. They did. The staff here is very efficient. She missed the joke. That was not unusual. Camilla believed sarcasm was something unattractive people used when they could not afford therapy. She reached forward and lifted the badge between two fingers, like it might leave a mark. Zone C means you're supposed to stay along the perimeter, not near the family tables, not near Preston's parents, and definitely not near the photographer unless someone specifically asks you. I looked at her fingers, touching the badge. You practiced that speech. I'm serious. I can tell. Your forehead stopped moving. Her smile tightened. Please don't do this tonight. Do what? Make things weird. That was rich. I had entered my own hotel through a loading dock because my mother typed a sentence suggesting I might cause discomfort to VIP guests. I was wearing a gray access badge at my sister's engagement party like I had wandered away from a conference on affordable carpeting. But yes, naturally, I was the one making things weird. I'm standing quietly with water, I said. That is about as dangerous as I get before appetizers. Camilla leaned closer. Look, Preston's family is very traditional. They care about background, presentation, stability. Do they? Yes. And I need tonight to go smoothly. Then maybe don't insult your guests. You're not just a guest. Gemma. No, your family. There it was. That word, family. In my parents' house. It meant obligation, without respect. It meant I was close enough to use, and distant enough to hide. Camilla lowered her voice, though not enough to stop a nearby waiter from hearing every word. You know how Mom and Dad feel. They don't want questions about your career. My career? The real estate stuff. The motel thing. The weird hotel investments. It sounds unstable. I looked around at the ballroom. Yes, I said. Hotels do seem risky. She followed my gaze and misunderstood it completely. This is exactly what I mean. Don't act jealous. I almost admired that. Camilla could look at a burning kitchen and accuse the smoke alarm of wanting attention. Jealous of what? Her eyes sharpened. Of me finally marrying into a family that understands success? I took a sip of water. It was very crisp. The Monarch had excellent carbonation standards. I had insisted. Camilla watched my face, looking for a crack. She wanted embarrassment, anger. Tears would have been ideal. Tears would have made her generous by comparison. I gave her nothing. That bothered her more than any insult could have. She straightened and flicked the badge one last time. Just stay in your area. Okay? I don't need my future mother-in-law asking why my older sister drifted through life without a real plan. I smiled. Wouldn't want that. And don't talk about money. That may be difficult. I'm surrounded by so much of it. Again. She missed it. Good. So we understand each other. We usually don't. But let's be optimistic. She gave me one final look. The kind she used when she wanted me to remember she had won some invisible contest. Then turned and floated back toward Preston. I watched her go. The sad thing was, Camilla had not always been cruel in a polished way. When she was little, she was just spoiled and dramatic, which is practically a family hobby in many American households. She used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms and ask me to check the closet for monsters. I always checked. I never told her monsters usually waited until adulthood and wore formal wear. Donovan found me next. My father approached with a whiskey in one hand and his public smile already loaded. Donovan Hayes was a man who believed volume could substitute for authority. He had silver hair, good posture, and the confidence of someone who had spent years spending money faster than he earned it. There you are, he said. That does appear to be the case. His eyes went straight to the badge. Good. Your mother handled that. So I noticed. He stepped beside me and turned slightly, blocking the view from the nearest tables. You need to help us tonight. I thought I was supposed to avoid discomfort. He frowned. Don't be cute, Dad. At my age, cute would be a bonus. He ignored that. Preston's family is important. Very important. This marriage opens doors for Camilla. For all of us? All of us? Yes. Gemma. All of us. Believe it or not. Your sister's success benefits the family name. The family name? My father loved the family name. He treated it like a blue-chip stock even though he had personally driven its value into a ditch with bad loans and worse judgment. I'll keep that in mind, I said. He lowered his voice. I need you to stand closer to the catering stations. I looked at him. Excuse me? If anyone asks, it will look less awkward. You know, with the badge. The badge you gave me. Your mother arranged the guest flow. Don't make this about feelings. That was one of Donovan's favorite tricks. Whenever he hurt someone, the injury became a feeling. And feelings were inconvenient little pests that practical people ignored. You want me to stand near the catering stations so people assume I'm staff? His jaw tightened. I want you to avoid drawing attention by blending into the workforce. For heaven's sake. Gemma. He glanced around to make sure no one important was listening. You always make things sound harsher than they are. No, I said. I make them accurate. A muscle moved in his cheek. There is no need for this attitude. I walked in through a loading dock wearing a limited access badge to my sister's engagement party. I think my attitude is showing remarkable restraint. You were invited, weren't you? That one landed exactly where he aimed it. Because yes, technically, I was invited. That was how my family worked. They never fully shut the door. They opened it just wide enough to make sure I could see what I was being denied. I studied my father's face. Once, I had wanted his approval so badly I mistook his criticism for guidance. I built spreadsheets for him, helped with tax documents, reviewed contracts he should have understood before signing. I thought usefulness might earn affection. It earned more assignments. Donovan, Helena called from across the room. My father flinched slightly. Interesting. He leaned closer. Just behave tonight. I looked at his whiskey glass. Always inspiring when leadership comes with a drink. He gave me a warning look, then moved away. I stayed near the service side of the ballroom. Exactly as instructed. From that position, the whole room opened up like a balance sheet. There were the assets, the monarch's chandeliers, the waitstaff, the food, the flowers, the building itself, the reputation of a historic hotel polished for public consumption. There were the liabilities, my parents, overextended and overdressed, selling a version of themselves they could not afford. There was Camilla, the centerpiece of the evening, glowing under lights paid for at a discount she had not earned. And there was Preston Vance, watching her with an expression I could not quite read. Fond. Yes. Proud. Maybe. But also distracted. Men like Preston were raised to notice market instability. Even when it came in satin. I took another sip of water. A server passed with crab cakes. He slowed near me, then remembered the manifest and kept walking with visible pain in his eyes. No meal required, I murmured. Across the room, Helena had reached full performance mode. She laughed at something, Mr. Vance said, placing her hand over her heart as though he had delivered a line from a Broadway comedy instead of what was probably a remark about golf club renovations. My mother had always known how to flatter upward, downward. She preferred knives. Mrs. Vance stood beside her husband. Holding champagne she had barely touched. She was watching me. Not openly, not rudely, but she was watching. Old money has a different way of looking. New money scans labels. Old money scans behavior. Her gaze moved from my gray lanyard to my dress, then to my shoes, then to the way staff adjusted their path around me without being asked. That last part mattered. People who have been obeyed all their lives recognize authority, even when someone tries to hang a plastic badge over it. I looked away first, not because I was nervous, but because I did not want to rush the evening. A few minutes later, Mrs. Vance excused herself from Helena and began crossing the room. Not toward the bar, not toward the ladies' room, toward me. I could practically hear my mother's social instincts scream from 40 feet away. Helena turned, saw the direction Mrs. Vance was walking, and moved so fast she nearly clipped a waiter carrying champagne. Eleanor, she called. Bright and too loud. There you are. You must let me introduce you to our florist. She did the most divine work with the peonies. Mrs. Vance did not stop. Her eyes stayed on me, up close. She was smaller than I expected, but she carried herself like a woman who had never once wondered whether she belonged in a room. Her navy dress was simple, her pearls were real. Her expression was polite enough to pass inspection and sharp enough to cut ribbon. "You're Gemma Hayes," she said. I smiled. "I am." Before she could say another word, Helena slipped between us like a closing elevator door. "There you are." "Gemma," my mother said, her voice sweet enough to damage dental work. "Honey, I believe the staff needs to keep this walkway clear." Honey. In public? I was always honey. Darling. Sweetheart. Private words were less decorative. "Mrs.?" Vance looked from Helena to me, then down at my badge. "Zone C," she read. Helena gave a little laugh. "Oh, it's just for event flow. You know how complicated these large functions can be." "I do know." "Mrs.?" Vance's tone said she knew many things, and most of them were not favorable. Helena placed a hand lightly on my elbow. I looked at it. She removed it. "Progress. Gemma prefers staying out of the spotlight," Helena said. "Does she?" Mrs. noted. Vance asked. My mother's smile trembled at the edge. "She has always been more practical." There was that word again. Practical. My family used it the way other people used basement. Necessary, but not where guests were taken. "Mrs." Vance turned her attention back to me. "That dress is familiar." Helena blinked. "My dress?" I asked. "Yes. Late 90s. Paris. Couture. Unless I am mistaken." "You are not." For the first time that night, my mother looked directly at what I was wearing instead of what she assumed I represented. Her eyes narrowed. I could see the math failing in her head. The dress was vintage, understated, and expensive in a way that did not shout for help. Helena knew prices when they had tags, not when they had provenance. "Mrs." Vance smiled faintly. "Beautiful choice." "Thank you." Helena laughed again. But this time it came out thin. "Gemma has always had unusual taste. Very thrift store treasure hunt. You know." "No." "Mrs." Vance said. "I don't know." That silence was small, but it had weight. My mother's face changed by half an inch. Not enough for strangers to notice. Enough for me. She was panicking. Not because Mrs. Vance had complimented my dress. Exactly. Because for one dangerous second, I had become interesting, and my mother had worked very hard to make sure I entered that room as a problem already solved. From the stage area, a staff member adjusted the microphone. A soft tap echoed through the ballroom. Dinner toasts were about to begin. Helena seized the opportunity like a drowning woman grabbing a tax deduction. "Oh, we should all take our seats," she said quickly. "Eleanor, you're right up front." "Of course." "Gemma, sweetheart, you understand. Family overflow is more comfortable near the rear." "Mrs." Vance did not move right away. She looked at me once more, and I saw the question forming behind her calm face. "Why is this woman being hidden?" I did not answer it. Not yet. I simply lifted my sparkling water and gave her the smallest polite nod. Helena pulled her attention back toward the front tables, talking too fast about seating arrangements and champagne service. I stayed where I had been placed, at the edge of the gold room, near the catering stations. Under a gray badge, my family thought, explained me. The microphone cracked once more. Donovan stepped onto the small stage with his whiskey smile and lifted his glass. And that was when my family stopped nudging me into the shadows and decided to make the humiliation public. Donovan loved a microphone the way some men love a boat they cannot afford. The moment he wrapped his fingers around it, his shoulders squared, his chin lifted, and that old boardroom voice rolled out across the ballroom. I had heard that voice sell bad ideas to nervous investors, explain away late payments, and turn family disappointment into something he called character building. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, tapping the microphone even though it was already working. "If I could have your attention." The string quartet faded out. Silverware settled. Conversations softened into polite silence. I stayed near the back, exactly where my family had placed me, with my sparkling water in one hand and my gray badge lying flat against my dress. Zone ici. Limited access. Water only. If anyone was keeping score, Donovan smiled at the room like he had personally built Western civilization. "Tonight is a very special night for the Hayes family," he began. "A night of joy, pride, and new beginnings." My mother sat near the front beside Mrs. Vance. glowing like she had been plugged into an outlet. Camilla stood beside Preston near the stage, one hand resting on his arm. Her custom ivory gown arranged around her like a press release. Donovan raised his glass toward my sister. To my beautiful daughter. Camilla. The room applauded. Camilla has always been the light of our family, he continued. Driven. Graceful. Ambitious. From the time she was a little girl, we knew she was destined for extraordinary things. I watched Camilla tilt her head with practiced modesty. That was always the arrangement in our house. Camilla was destined. I was dependable. Destiny got applause. Dependability got errands. Donovan kept going. She has been, without question, my most successful investment. There it was. My most successful investment. A few guests chuckled warmly, because they thought it was a proud father making a charming little joke. I did not laugh. Investments are measured by return. If my father had ever measured Camilla properly, he might have noticed the expenses were outrunning the revenue. But that was the thing about my family. They did not like accurate accounting when feelings were available. Donovan gestured toward Preston. And now she joins her life with Preston Vance, a man from a family we deeply admire. A family of tradition, discipline, and achievement. Mrs. Vance did not smile. She sat with her champagne untouched, watching my father like he was a contractor, giving an estimate she already knew was padded. Preston smiled tightly, probably trying to decide whether discipline and achievement sounded flattering or like something printed on a private school brochure. Donovan continued for another few minutes, praising Camilla's taste, its charm, and natural leadership. He spoke as if my sister had built a company, funded a hospital wing, and negotiated world peace between appetizer courses. In reality, she had once called me in tears because her apartment's dishwasher made a noise, and she did not know whether dishwashers could explode. But fine. Every family needs mythology. Then Donovan looked toward the back of the room. Toward me. A small warning moved through my chest. Not fear. More like an investor seeing a bad clause buried in a contract. And of course, he said, voice brightening, we are grateful to have family with us tonight in all their many forms. My mother's head turned quickly. Camilla's smile sharpened. Ah, so this part had been planned. Or at least hoped for. Donovan lifted his glass a little higher. Our family has always believed everyone finds their own path. Some paths are traditional. Some are a little more creative. A few guests turned in their chairs. I stood still. He chuckled into the microphone. My older daughter, Gemma, is here tonight too. Now more heads turned. Not because anyone cared who I was. Because people are trained to follow the spotlight. Even when the spotlight is just a father aiming a smile like a small weapon. I lifted my glass half an inch. Donovan laughed. Gemma has always marched to the beat of her own drum. Real estate projects. Old buildings. Unusual ideas. She reminds us that not everyone needs the conventional route. A few polite laughs. The kind people give when they are unsure whether a joke is safe, but do not want to be first to object. At the front, Helena covered her mouth in that delicate way she had, pretending to be amused and embarrassed at the same time. My father went on. And that is what makes tonight so meaningful. Camilla shows us what focus, polish, and commitment can create. There it was. Clean as a knife. Camilla was focus. I was the cautionary contrast. Camilla was polish. I was the drumbeat in the alley. My face did not move. That irritated him. I could tell from the tiny pause after his sentence. Donovan preferred reactions. He liked people to flinch so he could pretend he had not swung. He finished his toast with something about love, family, and the future. Everyone applauded. Because the speech was over, and people like knowing when to clap. I thought that might be enough. It was not. Camilla reached for the microphone. Of course she did. If my father opened a door, my sister would install a chandelier in it and pose underneath. Thank you, Daddy, she said, kissing his cheek. She turned to the room, glowing under the lights. I just want to say how overwhelmed I am tonight. Seeing everyone here. Seeing our families come together. It feels like a dream. Her voice had that soft, emotional edge people use when they want their sincerity photographed. She looked at Preston. And Preston, I am so lucky to be marrying someone who understands what it means to build a real life, a stable life, a life with purpose. I took another sip of water. There was something almost relaxing about watching people dig with both hands, Camilla continued. And I want to thank my parents for giving me every opportunity, every lesson, every bit of guidance. They taught me that presentation matters, reputation matters, choices matter. Helena nodded so hard she nearly became a metronome. Then Camilla's eyes found me. My sister smiled, not kindly. And I also want to thank my quirky older sister, Gemma, for being here tonight. The room shifted again. This time the silence had edges. Camilla gave a little laugh, inviting others to join. Gemma has always been our free spirit. She spent years drifting from one odd project to another, buying little places nobody else wanted, chasing ideas most of us never really understood. A few guests laughed, not loud, not cruel yet, just enough to encourage her. That was all Camilla needed. But honestly, she said, pressing a hand to her chest, I think every family needs someone like that. Someone who reminds you what happens when you don't follow a clear plan. There it was. The room laughed more this time. My mother's shoulders relaxed. Donovan smiled into his whiskey. Camilla was enjoying herself now. I could see it. Attention made her careless. Approval made her sloppy. And Gemma, wherever you are back there, I raised my glass again. Several people turned fully toward me. They saw the gray lanyard, the edge of the room, the staff entrance behind me. Camilla laughed. There she is. Thank you for showing up. I know, big formal events aren't really your thing, but it means a lot that you made the effort. That line was delivered sweetly enough to fool anyone who had not spent a lifetime hearing sugar used as packaging for poison. Helena leaned toward the woman at the next table and said, just loud enough for nearby people to hear. She does try. Poor thing never quite found her lane. Poor thing. Lost cause had probably been too strong for the Vance table. So my mother chose a phrase with softer shoes. The laughter around the front tables became uneven. Some people smiled because they thought they were supposed to. Others looked down at their plates. A man near the bar suddenly found his cufflink fascinating. Mrs. Vance did not laugh. Preston did not either. His eyes moved from Camilla to me, then to my badge. Something flickered across his face. Good. Not sympathy. I did not need sympathy. Recognition. The most dangerous thing in a room full of lies is one person beginning to notice the pattern. Camilla kept smiling, but her eyes were fixed on me now. She expected me to shrink, maybe look away, maybe flush with shame, maybe leave, which would have been perfect. Then they could all say I had always been dramatic, always unstable, always unable to handle family events. Instead, I stood exactly where they had put me. I looked at my sister without blinking. Not angry, not wounded, not pleading, just looking. It is amazing how fast a person can become uncomfortable when the target refuses to behave like one. Camilla's smile faltered, only a little, but the microphone caught the small breath she took. Well, she said, trying to recover. Anyway, we love her in our own way. That sentence landed badly. Even the people who had laughed seemed to hear it. In our own way. What a useful little phrase. People use it when the normal way would require decency. My father's expression tightened. Helena's hand went to her pearls. Camilla glanced toward Preston, then back at the room. So, yes, she said. Tonight is really about love and family and really dog and new beginnings. She had lost the rhythm. I watched it happen with professional interest. A confident speaker can recover from a stumble. A performer who depends on control can unravel when the audience stops obeying. The air changed, not dramatically. No one gasped. No one stood up. This was not a soap opera. This was worse for Camilla because it was real. People were still seated, still holding champagne, still wearing polite faces. But they were reassessing. They had seen me. They had seen the badge. They had heard the jokes. And they had also seen that I was not embarrassed. That did not fit the story my family was selling. Camilla's cheeks colored under her makeup. She laughed again. Too quickly. Sorry. I'm emotional. That was a smart pivot. But late. Preston touched her elbow. Maybe to steady her. Maybe to stop her. She handed the microphone back to the event coordinator with a brittle smile. The applause came, but it was thinner than before. Polite applause has a temperature. This was cool. At the back of the room, a server stopped beside me with another glass of sparkling water. I had not asked for it. He offered it anyway. I took it. Thank you, I said. His mouth barely moved. You're welcome. Ma'am. Ma'am. Quiet. Respectful. Automatic. Not loud enough to trigger anything yet. But Mrs. Vance heard it. I saw her eyes move toward the server. Then toward me. Helena saw that too. My mother's face tightened with a new kind of worry. The kind that arrives when a locked cabinet starts making noise. Camilla stepped down from the stage and hugged Preston. But her eyes kept cutting back to me. She had tried to turn me into a joke and somehow made herself look smaller. That was the first crack, not the collapse. Not yet, just the first clean fracture in the glossy surface. Dinner service was supposed to begin right after the toasts. The staff moved with practiced timing. Doors opening. Trays aligning. Wine captains shifting into place. My family thought the worst of the evening was behind them. They had laughed. They had pointed. They had survived my silence. Then, from somewhere behind the kitchen doors, I heard a clipped voice on the staff radio. Julian, we have a problem with the main course delivery. I looked toward the service corridor. There it was. The kind of problem no toast could polish. And this one was going to need the owner. I did not move when the radio call came through. That is one thing I learned early in business. When a problem appears, the first person who panics usually becomes part of it. The ballroom kept humming for another minute, still wrapped in candlelight and polite applause. Most guests had no idea anything had gone wrong. That was how good hotels worked. A crisis could be happening 20 feet away, and the people paying for dinner would still be discussing wine notes like civilization had been saved by a decent Pinot Noir. Behind the service doors, however, the temperature had changed. Not literally. The monarch's kitchen ran with the kind of discipline that made health inspectors smile against their will. But operationally, something had shifted. I could hear it in the pace of footsteps. The clipped voices. The shorter replies. Julian appeared at the edge of the corridor, tablet in hand, listening to his earpiece. His face was calm. Too calm. That meant the problem was real. I stayed near my assigned shadow and watched. A banquet captain approached him fast. Speaking low, Julian glanced toward the kitchen, then toward the dining tables, where the first course had already been cleared. Wine was being poured. Guests were settling in, expecting dinner to arrive in the next few minutes. Timing mattered. In a luxury hotel, dinner service was not just food. It was choreography. Delay one course too long, and the entire event started to sag. People noticed. Champagne ran ahead of the menu. Conversation got loose. Complaints grew legs. My mother would call that a disaster. I would call it Tuesday with better flowers. Julian stepped into the service corridor. The door swung behind him, cutting off most of the sound. But not all. I heard enough. Temperature failure? A pause. How long was it above safe range? Another pause. No. Do not plate it. Pull the shipment. Good. That was why Julian managed the Monarch. He did not gamble with guest safety to save face. Some hotels would have argued, tested, hesitated, hoped. Julian made the call before ego could get involved. The main course, according to the event file, was imported Wagyu beef with seasonal vegetables and a red wine reduction. Camilla had insisted on it because Preston's mother had once mentioned that the Vance family preferred quiet luxury. My sister heard quiet luxury and ordered beef that needed a passport. The delivery truck's refrigeration unit had failed in transit, not long enough to create a scandal if handled properly. Long enough that no serious kitchen would serve it. The executive chef appeared beside Julian, arms folded. Yav hard. We can move to the reserve steaks, he said. Dry-aged prime. Enough portions. Better than the original menu. Honestly, Julian looked at the tablet. Internal cost? 15,000. Give or take. Labor impact? Manageable. Timing? We can recover in 12 minutes if I get authorization now. There it was. The Monarch kept a private reserve for executive events, ownership dinners, and emergencies involving people who paid enough to expect the impossible with garnish. Releasing that inventory was not a kitchen decision. It hit internal cost controls, event margin, and insurance documentation. In plain English, someone had to approve spending serious money to protect Camilla's perfect evening. That someone was me. I took another sip of water. Cold. Clean. Still technically my only meal. The irony had excellent structure. Julian said something I could not hear, then looked through the small glass panel in the kitchen door. At me. Not long. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Just enough. I gave him no signal. Not yet. He turned back to the chef. Hold. I'll handle authorization. Meanwhile, the first ripple reached the ballroom. It started with a pause in service. Servers who should have been entering with dinner instead moved along the walls with empty hands. A wine captain whispered to another. The event coordinator checked her headset, nodded, then forced a smile so tight it probably required dental insurance. Guests noticed. They always do. Not the exact issue, but the absence of movement. A luxury dinner is like a clock. When the hands stop, even people who cannot tell time start asking questions. Camilla noticed first. Naturally, she was seated at the front table beside Preston. Glowing a little less now that her microphone performance had cooled the room, she looked toward the kitchen doors. Then toward my mother. Helena's head turned. My mother had the instincts of a hawk when it came to social embarrassment. She could ignore a daughter for years. But a delayed dinner course? Suddenly, she had surveillance capabilities. She leaned toward Donovan. He frowned, set down his drink, and waved sharply at a passing server. The server gave the professional smile of a man who had been trained not to say, "Please stop waving at me like I am a taxi. Dinner will be out shortly." "Aye, sir," he said. "How shortly?" Donovan asked. "Very shortly." That answer meant absolutely nothing. But it sounded polished. My father did not like answers he could not dominate. Helena rose from her chair. That was when I knew the evening was about to become educational. She crossed toward the service area with Camilla close behind her, ivory gown brushing the floor like a very expensive warning sign. Donovan followed, slower but annoyed enough to make up the distance. They intercepted Julian just as he stepped out from the kitchen corridor. Helena put on her hostess smile, the one she used when she was furious, but there were witnesses. "Julianne, isn't it?" she said. "Yes, Mrs. Hayes. We seem to have a delay. We are managing a kitchen issue." Camilla's eyes widened. "A kitchen issue? What kind of kitchen issue?" "A supply issue with the main course." Camilla's face changed in a way that would have thrilled a documentary crew. "The wagyu?" Julian did not blink. "The original shipment cannot be served." For a second, nobody spoke. Then Camilla laughed once, high and sharp. "No, that is not possible. I approved the menu. Preston's family has the menu cards. It says wagyu. A menu card does not override food safety." That was a beautiful sentence. I almost applauded. Helena stepped closer, lowering her voice, but not enough. "Mr. Pierce, this is a very important event. We have Preston Vance's family in that room. I do not think you understand what kind of guests you are hosting." Julian's face remained neutral. "I understand exactly what kind of guests we are hosting." That was also a beautiful sentence, though my mother did not know why. Donovan moved in beside Helena. "Then fix it. We have an alternative." "What alternative?" Camilla demanded. "Our executive reserve dry-aged prime steaks. They are available. And our chef can adjust service quickly." Camilla looked offended, which was impressive considering the replacement was arguably better. "I don't want guests thinking we downgraded. Most guests will not know unless someone tells them." That landed. Camilla's mouth snapped shut. Helena recovered first. "Fine. Use the reserve." Julian folded his hands in front of him. "I need authorization." "You have my authorization," Helena said. "I'm afraid that is not sufficient." Her smile vanished. "Excuse me? The reserve requires ownership approval." Donovan let out a short laugh. "For a dinner substitution? For a $15,000 internal expense and inventory release?" "Yes." Camilla's eyes flicked toward Preston's table. People were watching now. Not openly. Not rudely. But watching the way people watch when a server drops a tray at a wedding and everyone pretends they are above curiosity. Helena's voice hardened. We are the client. Yes. We are paying for this event. Julian paused. In part. My head tilted slightly. Careful. Julian. My mother caught it too. What does that mean? It means the event account includes adjusted pricing. The VIP discount. Helena snapped. Which your hotel offered because of our connections. Julian said nothing. That silence was so clean I wanted to frame it. Camilla stepped closer, trying a different tone. Julian. Please. This is my engagement party. You don't want the monarch's reputation damaged over one dinner course. Do you? Of course not. Then just do it. I cannot release the reserve without proper authorization. Donovan's face reddened. Listen. Young man. Julian was not young. He was also not impressed. Mr. Placeable. Hayes. I understand the urgency. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, your hotel is about to embarrass my daughter in front of one of the most important families in the city. My father said, your hotel, with the contempt of a man who believed service workers should absorb problems quietly and thank him for the opportunity. The room had gone softer now. Conversation near the front table slowed. Mrs. Vance was watching over the rim of her champagne glass. Preston had turned in his chair. Camilla saw them watching. Panic sharpened her voice. Fix it. Now. Julian adjusted his cuff. I intend to love. Then he did something my mother did not expect. He did not apologize again. He did not run back to the kitchen. He did not bow under the pressure of Helena's fake connections. Donovan's volume, or Camilla's bridal panic. He turned away from all three of them and walked toward me. The movement itself was quiet, but the effect was not. People noticed because Julian was the general manager. People noticed because my parents were still standing there with their demands unfinished. People noticed because he crossed the ballroom with the calm purpose of a man who already knew where authority sat, or in my case, stood near the catering stations, wearing a gray lanyard. Every step he took changed the room by a degree. Helena's expression went from anger to confusion. Donovan looked irritated first, then uncertain. Camilla stared at me as if I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. I did not move. I held my sparkling water. Limited access rested against my dress. Mrs. Vance leaned back slightly in her chair. And for the first time all night, her mouth curved with real interest. Julian stopped in front of me. Not beside me. In front of me. He lowered his head with the smallest, most professional nod. Then, in a voice clear enough for the front tables and my entire family to hear, he said, Good evening, ma'am. We have a supply issue with the main course. Do I have your authorization to release the executive reserve? For one clean second, the ballroom forgot how to breathe. That was not an exaggeration. I heard it. No glasses clinking. No forks touching china. No polite cough from a guest who wanted to pretend he was not listening. Even the string quartet seemed to hold still. Bows hovering like they had been told, the next note might violate a contract. Julian stood in front of me with perfect professional calm. Do I have your authorization to release the executive reserve? He repeated. I looked at him, then past him. Helena's face had gone blank in the way faces do when the brain receives information it refuses to process. Donovan stared at Julian like the man had just asked permission from a houseplant. Camilla's mouth parted slightly, which was rare. My sister usually kept her expression locked unless a camera was nearby. I let the silence stretch. Not too long. Just long enough to make everyone understand that Julian was not confused. Then I said, What is the estimated internal cost? Julian answered at once. Approximately $15,000, including inventory adjustment and kitchen labor recovery. And service timing? The chef can recover within 12 minutes. No safety risk? The original shipment has been pulled. Reserve inventory is cleared and stored properly. I nodded, approved. Release the reserve. Keep the menu language unchanged. No announcement to guests. Adjust the event account internally under owner discretion. Yes. Ma'am. He turned as if this were the most normal conversation in the world. That was when Helena laughed. It came out sharp, fake, and much too loud. Oh, for heaven's sake, she said. Julian. You are confused. Gemma is not the person you need to ask. Julian stopped. Slowly. He turned back. He did not look annoyed. That would have been too generous. He looked professionally disappointed. The way a doctor might look at a patient who insisted cigarettes were basically vegetables. I assure you, Mrs. Hayes, I am addressing the correct person. My mother's smile twitched. No. You are not. Gemma is my daughter. She is a guest. That word again. Guest. Limited access. Zone C. Water only. Julian's voice remained even. She is also Ms. Bess. Gemma Hayes. Sole owner and proprietor of the Monarch Hotel. The sentence crossed the ballroom like a tray dropped on marble. Somebody near the front actually gasped. A small sound. Quickly swallowed. But real. Camilla made a noise that was almost a laugh. No, she said. No, she is not. I looked at her. She looked back at me. And for the first time all night, there was no performance in her face. Just raw disbelief. Donovan pushed forward. That is enough, he snapped. This is a sick joke. Julian said nothing. My father pointed at me. She can barely afford her own life. Do you understand that? She buys old roadside properties and calls it a career. She is not buying luxury hotels in downtown Chicago. A few heads turned toward me again. I kept my face calm. There is a specific kind of satisfaction in letting someone publicly underestimate you after the paperwork has already cleared. It saves so much, explaining. Dad, I said quietly. You may want to lower your voice. He ignored me, which was consistent. Who put you up to this? He demanded, turning back to Julian. Is this some employee prank? Did she tell you to do this because she was embarrassed? Julian's expression cooled another degree. The ownership structure of this hotel is not a prank. Helena stepped in, her voice trembling now under the sugar. Gemma, tell him to stop. Right now. I tilted my head. I thought I did not have authority. Do not be childish. Mom. I entered through the loading dock tonight because you wrote it into the event instructions. I am simply respecting your attention to procedure. That landed harder than I expected. A whisper moved through the nearest tables. Mrs. Vance looked down at my badge again. Then she looked at Helena. Not angry yet. Worse. Interested. Camilla's eyes darted from her mother to Preston. Preston had gone still. His face had lost the polished engagement party smile. He was watching my family like a man, realizing the house tour had skipped the cracked foundation. Donovan stepped closer to me. Gemma, whatever this is. And it, whatever this is, I said, is dinner service. You are humiliating your sister. I almost laughed. There are moments when the universe hands you a line so generous you should send flowers. I'm humiliating, Camilla? His jaw worked. This is her engagement party. Yes. At my hotel. His face flushed. You expect us to believe that? No. I said. I expect you not to. That has been the pattern. Helena shook her head fast. This is absurd. Gemma, you have always exaggerated. Always. You twist things. You take offense. You make yourself the victim. There it was. The family emergency kit. Deny. Blame. Reframe. I had seen it used on missed birthdays. Unpaid debts. Broken promises. And the time Camilla borrowed my car in college and returned it with a dent the size of a grapefruit. Somehow. Be predessered. I had been dramatic about transportation. Julian lifted one hand slightly. Mrs. Hayes. Ownership records are public. Then show them. Donovan barked. Show them right now. That was not a smart request. But Donovan had built an entire life on not recognizing weak positions. Before Julian could respond, a man near the second row of tables stood. Arthur Bell, my corporate attorney, had been invited as a regular guest because his wife knew the Vance family through a hospital board. He was in his 60s. Silver-haired. Quiet. And gifted at making terrible news sound like a calendar update. I had not asked him to intervene. That made it better. Arthur buttoned his suit jacket and stepped into the open space between the tables. I can clarify, he said. Donovan turned on him. And who are you? Arthur gave him a pleasant smile. Counsel for Ms. Now. Hayes's holding company. The room shifted again, not loudly. But the social weight moved. People trust a lawyer in a suit holding documents more than they trust a father shouting near the salad course. That may not be fair. But it is often useful. Arthur opened a slim folder he had apparently brought with him. Because good attorneys travel like thunderstorms, quiet until needed, then suddenly full of paperwork. He removed several pages and handed them first to Julian, then to Mrs. Vance. Not to Helena, not to Donovan, to Mrs. Vance. That was deliberate. Arthur understood leverage. Mrs. Vance accepted the pages with one elegant hand. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "Public acquisition records? Corporate filings? And the ownership disclosure chain for the Monarch Hotel." Helena's mouth opened. Arthur continued. "The property was purchased 6 months ago through Hayes Meridian Hospitality LLC. Ms. Gemma Hayes is the sole managing member and beneficial owner." Mrs. Vance read silently. The ballroom waited. I watched my mother watching Mrs. Vance read. Helena had spent the entire evening chasing this woman's approval. And now the truth was reaching Mrs. Vance through legal documents instead of my mother's performance. That had to sting. Mrs. Vance looked up. Her eyes moved to me. "Paid in cash?" she asked. Arthur nodded. "The acquisition was completed without seller financing." A few people whispered again. Donovan's face darkened. "That cannot be right." Arthur turned one page. "It is right." Camilla looked at Preston. "Preston, this is insane. She never told us." Preston's answer was quiet. "Apparently. None of you asked." That small sentence hit Camilla harder than the documents. She pulled back slightly. Helena recovered enough to attack a different angle. "This is still completely inappropriate. Whatever Gemma owns or does not own. This is Camilla's engagement celebration. A decent sister would not make a scene." I looked around the ballroom. At the guests who had laughed when Camilla called me a free spirit without a plan. At my father, who had called her his only successful investment. At my mother, who had listed me as limited access inside my own building. Then back at Helena. I did not take the microphone. Her face tightened. "I did not assign myself Zone C." I continued. "I did not write service entrance only. I did not mark myself. No meal required. I did not make jokes about my career in front of strangers." Camilla's eyes widened. "You are doing this on purpose." "No. Camilla. The kitchen had a supply issue. Julian asked the owner for authorization. That is how operations work." "It is my party." "Yes," I said. "And I just approved $15,000 to keep dinner moving." That shut her up. For the first time all night. The numbers entered the room with shoes on. Mrs. Vance looked back at the papers. "There is another matter," Arthur said gently. Helena froze. Arthur did not enjoy cruelty. He enjoyed precision. It was much worse. The event account received a preferred pricing adjustment under the hotel's discretionary family and employee policy. Mrs. Vance's head lifted. "Family policy?" Julian answered that one. "Yes, ma'am. The discount was applied because Ms. Hayes is the owner and Camilla Hayes is her sister." The silence after that sentence had texture. Helena's earlier bragging returned to the room like a bad smell. When you know the right people, certain doors open. The Monarch understands the kind of family it is hosting tonight. I watched Mrs. Vance process it. Then I watched her turn slowly toward my mother. "So, the special VIP discount you mentioned?" Mrs. Vance said. "Came from the daughter you instructed to use the servant entrance." Helena's lips parted. No sound came out. That was new. Donovan tried to step in. But Mrs. Vance lifted one finger without looking at him. He stopped. Old money. I had to admit. Had excellent hand signals. Camilla was pale now beneath the makeup. Preston stared at the floor for a second. Then at me. Then at Camilla. His face was not angry in the loud way. It was worse. He looked embarrassed to be standing near the lie. Julian's earpiece crackled softly. He touched it. Listened. Then looked at me. "Chef is ready to proceed." "Ma'am, proceed," I said. He nodded and left for the kitchen. The ballroom remained frozen behind him. Then, almost like a machine restarting, service resumed. The doors opened. Servers emerged with polished timing, carrying plates that smelled rich enough to forgive almost anything. Almost. Dinner would be saved. Camilla's engagement would not. Mrs. Vance folded the acquisition records with careful hands, placed them on the table in front of her. and looked at my family as if she had just found mold behind expensive wallpaper. And I knew the next calculation would not be about steak. Mrs. Vance did not raise her voice. That was the first thing I noticed. A lot of people think power sounds like shouting. It usually does not. Shouting is what people do when they are trying to borrow authority from volume. Real power is quieter. It sits back, reads the document, and lets the room understand it is about to lose something. She placed the acquisition records on the table beside her untouched champagne. Then she looked at my mother. Not at the dress. Not at the pearls. Not at the little hostess smile Helena had spent all evening polishing like rented silver. At her. Mrs. Hayes, she said. I believe you told me this event reflected your family's standards. Helena blinked quickly. It does. Of course it does. This has simply become a misunderstanding. Mrs. Vance turned her head slightly toward me. A misunderstanding? Helena's laugh came out thin. Yes. Gemma can be very private. She enjoys surprising people. That was new. Apparently I had gone from embarrassment to mysterious businesswoman in under 5 minutes. An impressive promotion. Though the benefits package still included no dinner, my father stepped beside Helena. His face red but his voice controlled enough to show he had remembered the audience. Eleanor. Please. This is family. You know how family dynamics can be. Things get complicated. Mrs. Fee. Vance looked at him for a long second. I know families can be complicated. Mr. Hayes. I do not know many families that assign their daughter a restricted badge at a party she is subsidizing. The sentence landed cleanly. No one laughed. Camilla stood near Preston, with both hands clasped in front of her gown. Her engagement ring catching the light every time her fingers trembled. The ring was large enough to have its own weather system. I wondered if Preston had insured it yet. He seemed like the type. Mrs. Vance, Camilla said softly. I'm so sorry this became awkward. Awkward. That was a convenient word. A dropped fork is awkward. Forgetting a name is awkward. Listing your sister as limited access at her own hotel while accepting her discount is not awkward. It is a case study. Mrs. Vance turned to my sister. Did you know? Camilla swallowed. Know what? That your sister owned the Monarch. No. That she was responsible for your discount? No. That she had been instructed to use the service entrance? Camilla hesitated. There it was. The hesitation. Tiny. Quick. But not quick enough. Preston saw it. His face changed before anyone said another word. Camilla must have seen him see it, because she rushed to repair the damage. I knew Mom had arranged guest flow, but that was just because the event was complicated. There were security concerns and seating limits, and security concerns? Mrs. Vance asked. My mother jumped in. It was not about Gemma personally. I looked down at my gray lanyard. Gemma Hayes, Zone C, limited access. I admired my mother's commitment to fiction. If lying were an Olympic sport, Helena would test positive for enthusiasm. Mrs. Vance followed my gaze, so the badge with her name on it was not personal. Helena opened her mouth, then closed it. Good choice. Preston finally spoke. Camilla. His voice was low. She turned toward him fast, relief flashing across her face as if he might save her. Yes? Did you know Gemma was asked not to speak to my parents? The ballroom went even quieter. Camilla's eyes filled with tears on command. She had always been good at that. Not crying. Exactly. Preparing the room for the possibility of crying. I didn't want you overwhelmed, she said. Preston stared at her. With your sister? She can be unpredictable. I raised my eyebrows. That was almost impressive. I had stood in the same spot for half an hour, holding water like a museum exhibit. And somehow I had become unpredictable. Preston looked at me. I lifted my glass slightly. Wild woman, I said. A few people near the back coughed into their napkins. Not laughter exactly. More like laughter applying for permission. Camilla's eyes flashed. Gemma. Please. No. Go on. I said. I'm fascinated by the risk assessment. Preston did not smile. That was fine. The joke was not for him. He turned back to Camilla. You told me your sister was struggling. Camilla's face tightened. She is private about her life. That is not what you said. Donovan tried to cut in. Preston. This is not the time. Preston looked at him. I am not your son. There was the first real crack in Donovan's posture. My father had been banking on that word. Son. Connection. Future. Vance access. He had probably already imagined saying it at golf lunches, business dinners, maybe even loan meetings where the Vance name would make bankers sit straighter. Preston took half a step away from Camilla. Not dramatic. Just enough. Camilla felt it like a slap. Mrs. Vance noticed too. Of course she did. That woman noticed everything except my mother's excuses. And I suspected she had noticed those as well, then filed them under fraud. She picked up the acquisition documents again and looked around the ballroom. Let me be very clear, she said. What concerns me is not that Miss Proposes. Hayes is wealthy. Helena's face twitched at Ms. Hayes. What concerns me, Mrs. Vance continued, is that this family presented one daughter as an embarrassment while using her resources to create an illusion of status. No one moved. That was a long sentence, but every word earned its seat. My father's mouth hardened. We have never used Gemma. I looked at him. He did not look back. Interesting. Mrs. Vance did. Mr. Hayes, she said. Your daughter was placed by the kitchen under a restricted badge, while your wife boasted to me about a discount that came from that same daughter. Your other daughter mocked her publicly with a microphone. You called Camilla your only successful investment while standing in a hotel Gemma owns. I would be careful with the word never. Donovan turned a deeper shade of red. For a man who had spent years making other people feel small, he did not enjoy compression. Helena reached for Mrs. Vance's arm again. Eleanor. Please. This is being blown out of proportion. Mrs. Vance looked at the hand. Helena withdrew it. Progress everywhere tonight. I do not like cruelty. Mrs. Vance said. I dislike sloppy cruelty even more. That one almost made me smile. Sloppy cruelty. Perfectly stated. Camilla began to cry for real now. At least, real enough. Her shoulders shook. Her hand went to her mouth. She turned toward Preston. Please don't let this ruin our night. Preston looked at her for a long moment. Our night? Yes, she whispered. This is about us. No, he said. It seems like tonight was also about making sure I did not see your family clearly. Camilla shook her head. That's not fair. Is it true? She looked at Helena. Bad move. Preston followed that look. Worse move. Mrs. Vance's expression became colder. There we are, she said softly. Camilla wiped under one eye, careful not to disturb her makeup too much. Even in crisis. Priorities? Gemma never told us she owned this place, she said. How were we supposed to know? I answered before I decided whether it was worth answering. You were not supposed to know. My business is not a family group project. Camilla turned on me. Then why are you doing this? I approved dinner. You exposed me. No. Camilla, you exposed yourself. The microphone helped. That one reached the back tables. This time, a few people did laugh. Quietly. But enough. Camilla looked around. Horrified. Helena snapped. Gemma. There it was again. My name as a warning. I ignored her. Mrs. Vance set the papers down. Preston. He straightened. Yes. Mother, we will not be signing the current prenuptial agreement. The sentence hit the front table like cold water. Donovan's eyes widened. Helena went still. Camilla stopped crying. Preston looked startled, but not shocked. That told me something. The Vances had already been cautious. Tonight had not created doubt. It had fed its stake. Camilla's voice rose. What? Mrs. Vance remained calm. The current agreement was drafted based on financial representations and character assumptions that now appear incomplete. Donovan recovered enough to speak. Eleanor. That is completely unnecessary. I disagree. That agreement was already reviewed. It will be reviewed again. Camilla turned to Preston. You said everything was fine. Preston looked at his mother, then at Camilla. I said the lawyers were finalizing it. Mrs. Vance's eyes stayed on the Hayes side of the room. If this marriage proceeds, my attorneys will rewrite the agreement tomorrow morning. Full asset protection. Full disclosure. No shared investment vehicles without independent review. No family loans. No business guarantees. No indirect access through marital property. Every phrase drained more color from my father's face. Ah, there it was. Now the evening had reached the balance sheet. Donovan was not upset about romance. Donovan was upset about blocked pathways. I could almost see the doors closing in his mind. The bailout loan. The introductions. The quiet assumption that marrying Camilla into money would give him leverage he had not earned. Mrs. Vance was not just rewriting a prenup. She was locking the pantry. Camilla seemed to understand only part of it. "You're punishing me," she said. Mrs. Vance looked at her. "No, dear. I am protecting my family from yours." That sentence finished the job. The ballroom was no longer pretending not to listen. Even the waitstaff, professional as they were, moved more quietly. Like the air had become expensive. Helena's smile collapsed. "This is cruel." Mrs. Vance's eyes sharpened. "No. Cruel is inviting your daughter to her sister's engagement party through a loading dock and then asking me to admire your family values." Helena looked at me then. Not with remorse. With blame. That was familiar enough to be boring. I took a sip of sparkling water. Still crisp. Still my only assigned refreshment. Preston turned to Camilla. "I need a minute." "Preston. Don't." "I said I need a minute." He stepped away from her. Toward his mother. And the space between them seemed wider than the ballroom. Camilla reached for him. But he moved just beyond her fingers. That, finally, shook her. Not the humiliation. Not the documents. Not even the prenup. Preston, stepping away in front of everyone. My sister had spent years believing optics could save her from truth. Now the optics were doing the opposite. Julian returned quietly from the kitchen and approached me. "Dinner is moving," he said. "Good." He glanced toward the front of the room, where my parents stood trapped between public shame and private panic. "Should I have security nearby?" "Not visibly." "Understood." "Also, make sure the full internal expense is documented." "Already done." I nodded. That was why I liked Julian. At the front, Donovan leaned toward Helena, speaking low and fast. Camilla stood alone for the first time that evening, surrounded by flowers, candles, and the sudden absence of certainty. Mrs. Vance lifted her champagne at last, though she still did not drink it. She looked across the room at me, not warmly. We were not friends. This was not a movie where two women lock eyes and become allies over a shared enemy, but there was acknowledgement. She had seen the structure, the fake wealth, the family cruelty, the hidden subsidy, the public lie, and she understood, probably better than anyone in that room, that a marriage is not just romance. It is a merger, and the Hayes family had just failed due diligence. Dinner plates began landing on tables with flawless timing. Dry-aged steak, not wagyu. A better meal. Really? But no one at the front table looked hungry anymore. My mother turned away from Mrs. Vance and started walking toward me. Donovan close behind. Camilla gathering her gown and following like a storm in ivory. They had lost the Vances for the moment. So naturally, they came for the asset. Me. They crossed the ballroom like people rushing toward the last lifeboat and realizing it charged interest. Helena came first. Because my mother always believed speed could replace strategy, Donovan followed with that stiff, angry walk he used when he was trying not to look desperate. Camilla trailed behind them, her ivory gown gathered in both hands. Face wet enough for sympathy, but not wet enough to ruin the photographs completely. I stayed where I was, near the service side of the room. Zone C, limited access. Still, apparently, the most powerful person in the building. Funny how placement works. Helena reached me and grabbed my wrist before she remembered we had an audience. Her fingers tightened, then loosened when she noticed Mrs. Vance watching from across the room. "Gemma," she said, smiling with all her teeth. "We need to talk privately." "No, we don't." Her smile froze. "Yes. Sweetheart?" "We do." Sweetheart again. Public language. Decorative language. The verbal equivalent of putting flowers over a crack in the wall. Donovan stepped beside her. "Enough," he said under his breath. "You've made your point. I approved dinner. You know exactly what you did." "I usually do. It saves time." His eyes flashed. Camilla pushed forward, voice shaking. "You ruined my engagement party." I looked past her at the tables. The dinner service had resumed. Guests were pretending to eat while listening with every nerve in their bodies. Dry-aged steak had arrived looking perfect. The Monarch team was performing beautifully. Honestly, if anyone deserved applause, it was the kitchen. I think your speech helped, I said. Camilla's lips trembled. You are enjoying this. No, that was true. Enjoyment would have been warmer. This was cleaner than enjoyment. This was a correction. Helena leaned closer. Come with us to the side room. There is no reason. There is every reason, she hissed, then immediately softened her face when a guest walked by. Family matters should be handled as family. That old trick again. Private rooms are where controlling families do their best work. Away from witnesses. Away from documents. Away from anybody who might ask why. The person being blamed is the only one speaking calmly. I looked toward the small side salon near the ballroom entrance. The door stood open. Inside were extra chairs, a floral box, and enough privacy for Helena to rewrite the night before dessert. No, I said. Donovan's jaw tightened. You will not embarrass us further in public. I'm not the one who used a microphone. Camilla let out a little sob. Why are you being so cruel? I turned to her. Grell? Her eyes widened, ready for more tears. This was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. It still can be. Dinner's saved? That's not funny. No, but it is accurate. Helena looked like she wanted to slap me and hug me for the cameras at the same time. Gemma, listen to me, she said. You need to tell Mrs. Vance this was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. You need to say Julian misspoke. He didn't. You need to say the ownership situation is complicated. It isn't. Donovan lowered his voice even more. You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look vindictive. I almost smiled. That was rich coming from a man who had just stood on stage and called Camilla his only successful investment while I wore a plastic badge near the kitchen. Vindictive would have been canceling the event, I said. Or denying the reserve. Or allowing the dinner course to fail after your daughter handed out printed menu cards. What I did was approve the better steaks. A man at the nearest table suddenly became very interested in cutting his meal. Donovan heard the small scrape of the knife and realized people were close enough to catch every word. His face changed. That was when he tried the father voice. Gemma, do not forget who raised you. I remember exactly who raised me. That shut him up for half a second. Not long, but enough. Camilla stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was making a heartfelt appeal instead of calculating damage. Please. Preston is upset. His mother is furious. If you just tell them we're close and this got blown out of proportion, we can still fix it. We're not close. We're sisters. That is a fact. Not a relationship. She flinched. Good. Some sentences should make contact. Her eyes hardened under the tears. You always do this. You act above us. You act like you're better because you made money. No. Camilla, I act like someone who stopped asking permission to exist. Helena snapped. Enough with the speeches. I agree. I started to step away. Donovan blocked me. Not aggressively enough for security. Not smart enough to avoid being seen. Julian noticed from across the room. So did Marcus near the service entrance. So did Mrs. Vance, who had the observational skills of a federal auditor at a charity gala. I looked at my father's shoulder in my path. Move. His eyes widened slightly. He was not used to that tone from me. Not because it was loud, because it had no pleading in it. Come to the side room, he said. No. Gemma. Move. He did, slowly, not because he respected me, because he understood too many people were watching. Helena recovered quickly and reached into the emotional toolbox. You have no idea what you're doing to your family. There it was. The family, not the truth. Not Camilla. Not Preston. Not the Vances. The family. The abstract little altar where I had been expected to keep sacrificing quietly while everyone else danced around it in nicer shoes. I turned back to her. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm no longer managing the consequences of your choices. Camilla wiped her cheeks. You could save this. I could. Then why won't you? Because saving it would require me to lie. Helena's voice sharpened. For once in your life, think of someone other than yourself. That sentence had history. My mother used it when I did not co-sign Camilla's lease. When I refused to cover Donovan's emergency tax payment. When I missed a brunch because I was closing on a property. When I said no to lending Camilla my car after she had already damaged the last one. Think of someone other than yourself. In my family, that meant think of Camilla first. Helena second. Donovan third. And if there was room left somewhere near the garage, maybe think of yourself quietly. I opened my clutch. Helena stopped talking. She saw the movement and knew, instinctively, that a woman opening a small evening bag during a family fight is either reaching for lipstick or evidence. I did not carry lipstick that night. I pulled out the folded paper. The original event email, printed cleanly, time-stamped, submitted by Helena Hayes to the Monarch Private Events Office. Camilla's eyes locked on it. What is that? The instructions. Donovan frowned. What instructions? I unfolded the page and held it at chest height. A few nearby guests leaned without meaning to. Even Preston, standing near his mother now, looked over. Helena's face lost color. She knew. Of course, she knew. I read calmly. Guest note. Gemma Hayes. Assigned Zone C access. Arrival through service and catering, loading entrance only to avoid embarrassing the VIP guests. The air shifted. I continued. Do not seat near Preston Vance's family. Do not allow guests to approach main family tables unless requested. Camilla whispered. Stop. I did not. Meal service. No meal required. Water only. The silence after that was not polite anymore. It was judgmental. Helena reached for the paper. I moved it out of her reach. No. Give me that. It's mine. I wrote that for event logistics. No. You wrote that because you wanted me present enough to prove you invited me, but hidden enough not to disturb the story. Donovan's face tightened. Gemma, people are listening. I know. That's why this is finally efficient. Camilla's voice broke. You kept that email? Yes. Why? I looked at her. Because when people put disrespect in writing, it's rude not to preserve their work. A quiet sound moved through the nearby tables. Not quite laughter. Not quite shock. Somewhere in between. Helena looked around, realizing the room had turned. That was the danger of evidence. It gave strangers permission to believe what they had already sensed. Mrs. Vance stood slowly from her table and walked toward us. No rush. No drama. Just a woman crossing a room with the kind of calm that made people sit straighter. Preston followed behind her. Camilla saw him coming and immediately shifted into apology mode. Preston, please. This is not what it sounds like. Mrs. Vance stopped a few feet away. It sounds very clear. Helena tried to smile. Eleanor, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Mrs. Vance said. The question is whether I need more fiction this evening. That was a beautiful sentence. I decided I liked her. Not enough to trust her, but enough to appreciate the craftsmanship. Donovan tried to regain control. This private family disagreement has gotten out of hand. Mrs. Vance looked at the paper in my hand. A private family disagreement submitted to hotel staff as written event policy. He had no answer. Preston looked at Camilla. You knew about this? Camilla shook her head too fast. Not the exact wording. That was not a denial. Everyone heard it. Preston closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them. You knew enough. Camilla began crying again. But this time the room did not move toward her. That is the thing about public tears. They work best before the documents arrive. She turned to me, voice rising. Why would you do this to me? I folded the email once. I didn't do this to you. You exposed me in front of everyone. You gave a speech in front of everyone. Her mouth twisted. You could have warned me. I did warn you. For years. Every time I stopped asking to be treated decently. Helena stepped in front of Camilla. She is under stress. She doesn't mean what she's saying. I looked at my mother. Which part? The service entrance? The cautionary tale? The no meal? Or the part where she asked me not to speak to the family she was marrying into? My mother's lips pressed together. There it was again. No apology. Just calculation. Donovan leaned close to me, voice low enough that only our little circle could hear. You are going to cost me everything. That was the first honest thing he had said all night. Not us. Not Camilla. Me. I looked at him. What exactly am I costing you? Dad. His eyes flicked toward Mrs. Vance. Too late. She saw it. So did I. So did Arthur Bell, who had drifted closer with the quiet timing of a man who billed by the hour and enjoyed good placement. Donovan looked away. Camilla grabbed my arm this time. Gemma, please, I need this marriage. You don't understand. I looked down at her hand. She removed it quickly. What I understand, I said, is that none of you came over here because you were sorry? You came because Mrs. Vance changed the prenup. Camilla's face crumpled. Helena inhaled sharply. Donovan said nothing. That silence was an answer with a tie on. I slipped the email back into my clutch. The view from the bottom is very clear, I said. You put me here. You just didn't realize I could see the whole room. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Donovan's control cracked enough for the truth to show through. He looked at me, then at Mrs. Vance, then back at me. And I knew the next words out of his mouth would not be about family honor. They would be about money. Donovan adjusted his tie before he spoke. That was how I knew the truth was about to come out wearing a costume. My father had always fixed his tie before asking for money, denying responsibility, or pretending he was still in control. It was a small habit. But small habits tell the truth when people do not. He looked at Mrs. Vance first, then at Preston, then finally at me. Gemma, he said, lowering his voice into something almost soft. You do not understand the pressure this family is under. That was new. For most of my life, I had been told I understood too little, felt too much, and asked for the wrong things. Suddenly, with a rewritten prenup hanging over the room like an unpaid bill, I had become someone who needed financial context. I folded my arms. Then explain it. Helena's eyes widened slightly. Donovan, she warned. He ignored her. That was also new. My firm has had a difficult year, he said. I waited. A difficult year was what people called a slow quarter when they wanted sympathy. Donovan's firm had been bleeding for longer than that. I knew because public filings existed. Vendors talked. And my father had the subtle financial behavior of a man trying to cover a roof leak with gift wrap. How difficult? I asked. His face tightened. That is not something to discuss in public. You picked the venue. A few people nearby shifted in their seats. Nobody pretended to eat anymore. Even the steak had become a prop. Donovan leaned closer. I was counting on this alliance with the Vance family to stabilize things. Alliances are for countries and boardrooms. Camilla is getting married. She is joining a family with resources. Mrs. Vance's expression did not move. Preston looked like he wanted to remove himself from the sentence. I tilted my head. So that is what this was? Camilla snapped. That is not fair. I looked at her. Isn't it? Her mouth opened, but no useful words came out. Donovan stepped in quickly, desperate now to frame the confession before it framed him. I never said the marriage was only about business. Of course not. Camilla loves Preston. Preston looked at Camilla. Camilla looked at the floor. A terrible little silence followed. My father continued anyway. Because men like Donovan often keep driving after the tires come off. But families help families. Connections matter. Reputation matters. Access matters. Preston's family has banking relationships, investment relationships, introductions that could help me restructure. Mrs. Vance finally spoke. Mr. Hayes, were you planning to request financial assistance from my family after the wedding? Donovan's face hardened. I would not call it assistance. What would you call it? A strategic opportunity. I almost laughed. There it was. The classic business phrase used when, please rescue me from my own mistakes, sounds too honest. Mrs. Vance looked at Preston. Did you know about this? No, Preston said. The answer came fast. Good for him. Camilla's shoulders rose. Daddy only mentioned that there might be future business conversations. Preston turned to her. You knew? I didn't know details. That keeps being your defense, he said. You knew enough, but never details. Camilla's eyes filled again. This time, Preston did not move toward her. Donovan looked at me, dropping the polite act. Gemma, you have the resources. There it was. The real reason they had crossed the room. Not remorse. Not family healing. Liquidity. I stared at him. You mean the monarch? I mean, you have done well, he said. As if praising me now was a coupon he could redeem. How generous of you to notice. This is not the time for sarcasm. Dad. You brought a failing firm to an engagement party and hid it under flowers. I think sarcasm is the least of our problems. His jaw clenched. I need a bridge loan. Helena closed her eyes. Camilla whispered. Daddy. But Donovan kept going. He had crossed the line. And men like him would rather build a bad house on the wrong side than walk back. Short term. Secured. I can repay it after restructuring. With your hotel assets. Your banking relationships. You could make one call. One call? I repeated. Yes. You want me to call a bank for you. I want you to help your family. There it was again. Family? The word that had done more unpaid labor in my life than any person I knew. I looked at the gray badge against my dress. You listed me as limited access. That was your mother's mistake. Helena's head snapped toward him. My mistake? Donovan ignored her. You and I both know she gets carried away with appearances. That was a beautiful little betrayal. Not brave enough to be accountability. Just selfish enough to be useful. Helena stared at him like he had spilled red wine on her soul. Camilla looked from one parent to the other. And for the first time all night, she seemed less like a bride and more like a child, watching adults admit the house was on fire. I turned back to Donovan. For 10 years, you mocked every property I bought. He exhaled. Gemma, you called my first motel a bad joke. I was concerned. You told me banks were taking advantage of me. They often do. You told Camilla, in front of me, that some people build lives while others collect broken buildings. His face flushed. I don't remember saying that. I do. That stopped him. Memory is inconvenient when only one person has been paying attention. I kept my voice calm. You said my work was unstable. You said I was wasting my education. You said I would come crawling back when the numbers stopped pretending. Donovan looked away. They didn't stop pretending. I said. You did. No one spoke. I could feel Mrs. Vance watching me. But I did not turn toward her. This was not for her. This part was between me and the man who had confused my silence for an available credit line. Donovan swallowed. I made mistakes. Yes. But I am still your father. Yes. And that should mean something. It does, I said. It means I know exactly how expensive your approval used to be. His face changed. For 1 second, I saw something real under the anger. Maybe shame. Maybe panic. Maybe the sudden memory of every time I had waited for him to say he was proud and received a lecture instead. Then he buried it. You would let your own father go bankrupt? No, I said. You did that without me. A few guests sucked in quiet breaths. Helena's face twisted. How can you speak to him that way? I looked at her. Clearly. Camilla stepped forward. Please. Gemma, if Dad goes under, it affects all of us. No, it affects the people who built their lives on his promises. That includes me. I know. Her eyes widened. Like she expected that to move me. Once. It would have. Once. I would have cleaned up the mess just to keep the family from falling apart. I would have written a check, made a call, covered a bill, softened the story, and then sat alone afterward, wondering why being useful felt so much like being invisible. That woman had entered through the loading dock. She was not leaving the same way. I turned to Julian, who stood several feet away, quiet and ready. Julian. Yes, ma'am. Please remove the preferred pricing adjustment from the Hayes event account. Helena went pale. Donovan's head snapped toward me. What? The VIP family discount, I said. Rescind it. Camilla's mouth dropped open. You can't do that. I can. It was discretionary. Julian nodded once. I'll have accounting update the invoice. Include the executive reserve expense. Of course. Donovan stepped toward me. Gemma. Do not do this. I looked at him. You wanted business. Here it is. His face reddened again. This is vindictive. No. This is pricing without emotional subsidy. Mrs. Vance's mouth moved slightly. She was either hiding a smile or revising her opinion of me upward. Possibly both. Helena's voice shook. You are charging your sister for her engagement dinner? The client is responsible for the event. We are your family. You were my family when you sent me through the catering entrance too. That one landed so hard even Camilla stopped crying. Julian's tablet chimed softly. He had already pulled up the account because, as I mentioned, great managers come prepared. The adjusted total, he said, with preferred pricing removed, executive reserve included, and rush, recovery, labor documented, is $85,000. Donovan stared at him. 85,000? Julian's tone was polite. Yes, sir. Camilla looked like someone had slapped the pearls off her future. We don't have that tonight, she whispered. I looked at Donovan. No, I said. I assumed not. He stepped closer, voice low and dangerous. You are trying to destroy me. No, I am refusing to underwrite you. There is no difference. There is to people who understand consent. His mouth closed. I turned to Julian. Payment due according to contract terms? Julian glanced at the tablet. End of event settlement. Unless ownership extends courtesy billing. Ownership does not. Yes, ma'am. Helena pressed one hand to her chest. Gemma. Please. That was the first please of the night. Interesting how manners arrive with invoices. Camilla reached for Preston. But he had moved beside Mrs. Vance, not far enough to make a scene. Far enough to make a decision visible. Preston, Camilla said. Voice small. He looked at her. I need space. You're just going to let her do this? He glanced at me. Then at the badge. Then at the printed email still partly visible from my clutch. No, he said. I think you all did this. Mrs. Vance turned to Julian. Mr. Pierce. Please make sure our family's portion of any expense is separated from the Hayes account. Of course, ma'am. Donovan looked as if the floor had betrayed him personally. For a moment, I thought he might yell. Really yell. But then he remembered the guests. The Vances. The attorney. The staff. The public records. The unpaid bill forming in real time. So he did what men like him do when power leaves the room. He looked for guilt. Gemma, he said, softer now. I loved you the best way I knew how. That sentence could have hurt me years ago, not because it was good, because I wanted so badly to believe there had been love somewhere under the criticism. The comparisons. The locked doors labeled practicality, but standing there, with Zone C around my neck and the monarch running smoothly around us, I understood something simple. Maybe he had loved me the best way he knew how, but that did not make it enough, and it did not make it my debt. I hope you learn a better way, I said. Then I removed the gray lanyard from my neck. I held it out to Julian. He took it like it was evidence. Please give that to the event file. Yes, ma'am. I turned toward the main entrance. Not the service corridor. Not the loading dock. The main doors. My mother saw where I was going. Gemma, she said. I did not stop. The room parted quietly as I walked through it. Not because anyone announced me. Not because I wanted drama. People simply understood that I belonged in that path more than anyone had been told. I passed the front table. Mrs. Vance gave me one small nod. Preston looked embarrassed. Camilla looked furious and terrified. Donovan looked old. That one surprised me. Not enough to turn back. At the lobby doors, Marcus stood beside the security post. He opened the brass-framed glass door before I touched it. Good evening, Ms. Hayes, he said. This time, he did not lower his voice. Good evening, Marcus. I stepped into the lobby. Under chandeliers, my family had wanted me to avoid. Across marble they had assumed was above me. Toward the front entrance where the valets stood waiting. Behind me, in the ballroom, my father was being handed an updated invoice for $85,000. Ahead of me, the city lights reflected in the glass doors. For once, I did not leave by the route they gave me. I left by the one I owned. The first thing I did after leaving the Monarch was not cry in the back seat. I know that disappoints people who enjoy a dramatic exit, but I have never found tears especially useful when accounting still needs instructions. I got into the car, closed the door, and texted Julian 3 words. Document everything tonight. He replied within 30 seconds. Already done. That was why I paid him well. The drive home took 20 minutes. Give or take. Chicago traffic had finally decided to behave, which felt suspicious, but I accepted the gift. I watched the city slide past the window. All glass. Streetlights. Late dinners. and people moving through lives that had nothing to do with my family's public collapse. That was the strange part. Inside the monarch, my mother's perfect evening had cracked down the middle. My father's bailout fantasy had been dragged into the light. Camilla's engagement had gone from society event to cautionary tale before dessert. Outside, people still waited at crosswalks. Dogs still pulled on leashes. Some poor guy on a scooter still believed he could beat a yellow light. The world is rude that way. It keeps going even after your family embarrasses itself in formal wear. By the time I reached my condo, Julian had sent the first summary. The Hayes account had been updated. The preferred pricing adjustment had been removed. The executive reserve cost had been added. The full balance was due under the contract terms. Donovan had refused to sign the updated settlement at first. Then Arthur Bell quietly reminded him that the original agreement already authorized post-event adjustments for approved substitutions, damages, and emergency service recovery. My father apparently argued for 18 minutes, which sounded about right. Donovan always believed a contract could be intimidated if he frowned hard enough. It could not. The next morning, I woke up to 7 missed calls. 3 from my mother, 2 from Camilla, 1 from Donovan, 1 from an unknown number that I later learned belonged to a crisis public relations consultant Camilla used when she needed someone to make consequences sound like misunderstandings. I did not return any of them. Instead, I made coffee, reviewed the final event report, and approved staff bonuses for the kitchen, banquet team, security, and front desk. They had earned it. Especially Marcus. A few weeks passed. The story did what stories do in wealthy circles. It traveled quietly at first, then faster. Then, with details nobody could prove but everyone enjoyed, repeating. By the end of the month, there were at least 4 versions of the night circulating through clubs, charity boards, private dining rooms, and whatever group texts rich women use when they pretend not to gossip. In one version, I had bought the Monarch the morning of the party just to humiliate Camilla. Creative, but legally exhausting. In another, Mrs. Vance had thrown champagne at my mother. She had not. Mrs. Vance was much too controlled to waste good champagne on Helena. In the most accurate version, my parents had forced their older daughter to enter through a service door at a hotel she owned, then got billed full price after mocking her in front of the wrong people. That version stuck. The engagement between Camilla and Preston was officially postponed. Indefinitely. Anyone over the age of 40 knows what indefinitely means in wedding language. It means the ring is probably in a safe. The vendors are nervous, and both families are pretending there is still a conversation. Preston did not make a public statement. The Vances were too disciplined for that. But their lawyers rewrote everything, from what Arthur heard through perfectly legitimate channels. The new prenup was not a prenup so much as a financial quarantine zone. No shared business obligations, no loans to the Hayes family, no guarantees, no access to trust assets, no gifts above a modest threshold without independent review, no family members using Preston's name to solicit investment. Beautiful work, really. I almost sent flowers to their attorneys. Camilla did not handle it well. That was not a surprise. My sister had spent most of her life being protected from the first consequence, so the second and third arrived like foreign weather. Her social circle cooled. Not all at once. People like that rarely cut you off cleanly. They become busy. They stop inviting you to small things. They still like your posts. But later, they say, "We should get lunch," with the same sincerity used on dental reminder cards. Her public relations career also took a hit, which was awkward because managing reputation is a difficult business when your own reputation has walked into a glass door. Within 3 weeks, Camilla took a mid-level communications job at a regional nonprofit. Honest work, steady benefits, no private driver, no designer showroom appointments. I heard she complained that the office coffee tasted like warm regret. That seemed unfair. Warm regret is still more expensive than office coffee. Donovan's situation moved faster. His firm had not been having a difficult year. It had been having a financial funeral with fluorescent lighting. Vendors were unpaid. A bridge lender had backed away. 2 clients had quietly moved their accounts. The Vance marriage, or more specifically the Vance name, had been his last shiny object to wave in front of banks. Without it, the numbers became very honest. He downsized the office first, then the staff, then the leased car. That last one probably hurt most. For years, Donovan had measured dignity by hood ornament. Seeing him drive something practical would have been poetic if poetry came with monthly payments. I did not celebrate. That may disappoint some people too. There is a difference between justice and entertainment. Justice is watching someone finally carry the weight they kept handing to you. Entertainment is needing popcorn while it happens. I did not need popcorn. I needed distance. Helena held out the longest. My mother had always believed image could outlive fact if she dressed it nicely and repeated it with confidence. She told people I had overreacted. Then she told people I had misunderstood old family teasing. Then she told people I had always been sensitive about Camilla's success. Each version collapsed under one problem. The email. Service entrance. No meal required. Water only. Paper beats performance. Every time. Eventually, she stopped trying to explain the night to other people and tried to explain it to me. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Not an email. A real letter. Cream paper. Blue ink. Her handwriting. Careful and decorative. The way she wrote thank you notes to people with summer homes. I found it on my desk at my penthouse office, placed on top of a courier envelope from my attorney. My assistant had marked it personal. That was generous of her. I sat down, took out the letter opener, and unfolded 3 pages of my mother attempting accountability with both hands tied behind her back. Dear Gemma, I have thought so much about that night. That was how it started. Not I am sorry for what I did. Not I should never have written those instructions. Not I hurt you. I have thought so much about that night. Classic Helena. Even regret needed to enter through the side door. She wrote that she had been under pressure, that she had wanted Camilla's engagement to be perfect, that Preston's family had made her nervous, that she had not meant for the service entrance instruction to feel personal. Feel personal. I had to set the page down for a moment, because what a remarkable phrase. As if I had accidentally interpreted my own name under limited access as directed at me. She wrote that family should not be torn apart by one evening. She wrote that I had always been stronger than Camilla, and maybe that was why they expected more from me. She wrote that Donovan was not sleeping well. She wrote that Camilla was devastated. Then, on the 3rd page, after all the emotional garnish had been arranged, she got to the real entree. Donovan needed help restructuring. Camilla needed help recovering professionally. A short-term family loan would show healing. There it was. My mother had written 3 pages to say she was sorry enough to ask for money. I leaned back in my chair and looked out over the skyline. My office was quiet. Not lonely. Quiet. There is a difference. Lonely is waiting for people to value you. Quiet is what arrives when you stop waiting. On my desk sat the preliminary acquisition package for a boutique hotel group out west. 5 properties. Strong locations. Messy management. Excellent upside if handled carefully. The kind of deal that required focus, discipline, and no emotional leaks. I picked up Helena's letter again and read the last line. We are still your family. I did not argue with the paper. It would not have helped. They were my family. That was true. But family is not a permanent line of credit. It is not a license to humiliate someone in public and ask for privacy when the bill comes due. It is not a magic word that turns disrespect into duty. For years, I had been their shield, the practical daughter, the backup plan, the one who fixed things quietly so the prettier story could keep walking around in good shoes. That job was unpaid, unappreciated, and finally, vacant. I fed the letter into the shredder. The machine took it without ceremony. Page by page, reducing Helena's careful handwriting to pale strips. I watched until the last piece disappeared. Then I opened the acquisition package and turned to the first financial summary. 5 hotels, 3 underperforming restaurants, 2 neglected spa leases, 1 ownership group tired enough to sell below value. Now that was a family structure I could actually improve. My phone buzzed once. A message from Julian. Final Hayes payment received. No further incident. I looked at the screen for a moment. No further incident. That sounded peaceful. I typed back. Thank you. Staff bonuses approved. Then I set the phone aside. Outside the window, the city moved on. Bright and indifferent. Somewhere in that city, My parents were probably telling themselves I had changed. Camilla was probably telling herself I had taken something from her. Donovan was probably calling bankers who no longer returned calls as quickly. They could tell themselves whatever they needed. I knew the truth. I had not destroyed my family. I had stopped financing the illusion that they were allowed to destroy me. That is the lesson I wish someone had told me years earlier. Maybe when I was younger. Tired. And still hoping that being useful would finally make me loved. You can love people and still stop paying for their disrespect. You can share blood and still require boundaries. You can walk away from a table where you were not fed, even if you own the dining room. And sometimes, the strongest thing you ever do is not revenge at all. It is removing your name from the list of people available to be used. I turned back to the hotel documents, picked up my pen, and circled the first number that looked wrong. The work in front of me was honest. The room was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, nobody was asking me to enter through the back door. Sometimes the hardest lesson in family is learning that love does not mean unlimited access to your peace. Being related to someone does not give them the right to shame you, use your money, dismiss your work, or decide where you belong. Many people spend years trying to earn respect from relatives who only notice them when they need help. That is not loyalty. That is emotional bookkeeping with one person always paying the bill. Gemma's story reminds us that dignity does not need to shout. She did not beg, argue, or try to prove her worth with anger. She let the truth, the documents, and her own quiet strength speak for her. That matters, especially later in life. When many people are told to keep the peace, even when the peace is built on their silence, the lesson is simple. Help people when you can. But do not become the shield that protects them from the consequences of disrespecting you. A healthy family honors your presence. It does not hide you by the back door, then ask you to pay for the party. Boundaries are not cruelty. Sometimes, they are the first honest form of self-respect.